It is always interesting for us to remember how historical evidence turns into historical fact. This whole process involves a lot of study, archaeological findings and consultations in old written records. Anything from a piece of cloth to a passage in a diary can contribute to the formulation, or better, the reconstruction of what really happened. Essentially, that's what history is, the study of what existed on Earth, socially and physically speaking. Unfortunately, we know that not everything comes to light, and that is why many scholars in this area often have no input when it comes to some historical speculations that simply cannot be proven or disproved with what has been discovered so far. This lack of evidence along with unanswered questions make these investigations all the more intriguing. In today's video I'm going to present 5 of the greatest mysteries in history that will probably remain unsolved. I'm DeLorean Edgar and this is Fear the Weird. Do you believe there is more to life than what we are told? Do you have burning questions about hidden and controversial topics? Subscribe to our channel and turn on the bell notification to unravel the mysteries of life and the universe. Who was Jack the Ripper? He may have been as a character in a movie, a book, or even in the newspapers. But you've probably heard of the famous assassin Jack the Ripper. The case is obviously real, and this wave of murders attributed to this serial killer began in 1888 in London. The attacks were made on women who prostituted themselves in the city, and the deaths followed a certain pattern. All the victims had their throats slit, and the vast majority of them, with the exception of one case, had their abdomens open and some mutilated organ. Investigators at the time were unable to find the person responsible for the crimes that were happening, and a total of 5 women had already been murdered. To make the case covered by the media more widely, the leader of the Whitechapel Surveillance Committee received an alleged letter written and signed by the serial killer who called himself Jack the Ripper. Along with the letter, a piece of a preserved human kidney was enclosed. Ultimately, the identity of this murderer, who can be considered one of the most famous in history, has never really been revealed. In 2014, an investigation that turned into a book announced that Jack's identity had finally been discovered. The findings point the killer to Aaron Kosminski, a 23-year-old Polish man who worked as a barber at the time, and was on the list of 100 suspects for having committed the crimes. In the same year of the book's release, a major flaw in the investigation was found. It destroyed the greatest piece of evidence that the researchers who published the book had in their hands. The proof would be a link between the DNA found in a chalet of one of the victims and the DNA of a Kosminski's descendant who would still be alive. Once again, it was concluded that Jack the Ripper would never have been identified. Where is Cleopatra's tomb? If there is one thing that makes Egypt even more interesting, it is the existence of pyramids that are enormous mortuary tombs. Well, we already know that only pharaohs and important people received funerals like that. But despite the fact that we hear so much about Cleopatra, no historian or archaeologist has ever been able to find her grave. Obviously, Cleopatra could not have been buried like any other person. In fact, accounts of what this tomb would look like have already been made by ancient writers. Records found say that Cleopatra and her lover Mark Antony were buried together around the year 30 BC. Plutarch, a writer who lived between AD 46 and AD 119, reported in his writings that the couple's tomb was located next to a temple built for the Egyptian goddess Isis. He even went so far as to describe this tomb as a tall and beautiful monument, filled with treasures made of gold, silver, pearls, emeralds, ivory and ebony. Although several historical records speak about this supposed grave, where it would be located and what would remain of it is still a mystery. What is the voynich manuscript and what does it say? Voynich manuscript is a 240-page book written and illustrated by hand during the medieval period in the 15th century. The book is one of the largest in existence when it comes to cryptography. Over 500 years ago, not a single word was officially translated from this book, which is all written in code. The alphabet that forms Voynich's texts had never been seen before. The drawings are in most cases the representation of plants or women and are not logical. Plants are of species that have never been seen before. Human representations are distorted and seem so disconnected that they almost look psychedelic. In addition, drawings that refer to astronomy and constellations of the zodiac can also be identified on these pages. Much like the author, the mysteries surrounding this book are many: its content, the meaning of the drawings, among others. There is also a certain theory that the manuscript that is popularly known as the book that no one can read would actually be a series of alienated words and had no real meaning. Even so, scholars claim that the standard of writing seems to have been very well planned and must be a language or code created exclusively by the author of the work. That is why it is so difficult to decipher it, because there are no references in any other language or alphabet. We need to accept that Voynich manuscript is far from being understood, and will probably continue to be everything it has always been for all these centuries. What was Wow signal? Mankind have been seeking answers about the existence of life outside the Earth for a very long time. And one of the greatest mysteries of cosmology happened in 1977, and it became known as Wow signal. That year, Jerry Eman, who was an employee of a NASA-based project, the SETI project, worked using radio signals captured from space to identify any pattern that was out of the ordinary. He then noticed that the records of waves coming from space were behaving in a very different way. This atypical signal lasted for 72 seconds. Jerry could see that this strange and unusual signal came from the south of the group of fifth magnitude stars Chi Sagittarii. When he saw this wave pattern printed in the form of codes on paper, he was so impressed that he circled the codes with a red pen and wrote the expression "Wow." It was at this point that the popular name of this sign came about. Many scholars in the area have tried to unravel what could have generated a wave like this in space. In 2016, researcher at St. Petersburg College, Antonio Paris, came up with a hypothesis to solve the mystery. According to him, the signal would have been emitted by a series of comets. Even so, nothing was ever confirmed, and even Antonio's theory has some logical flaws. This is why the mystery about Wow signal is perpetuated to this day. Did the famous sunken and lost city of Atlantis really exist? Have you found yourself thinking about this possibility? Will they ever really find the ruins at the bottom of the sea of an ancient civilization? Or is all this speculation just a myth? Well, this is undoubtedly a great mystery. The first person who spoke of Atlantis' existence was Plato in two literary monologues. The Timaeus and the Critias were written in the year 4 BC. In the works, he says that the city of Atlantis was located on an island in the Atlantic Ocean, and close to the Pillars of Hercules, which is what the Strait of Gibraltar was called at that time. He also said that the Atlantis civilization would have conquered territories in both Europe and Africa, but after a major natural incident the city would have fallen to the bottom of the sea overnight. The big problem with these reports is that these two books are literary, and therefore cannot be used as historical records. But scholars today still question whether Plato would have been inspired by a real civilization to put together and elaborate his story. If the city of Atlantis really existed, many theories try to reveal what this city was like and where exactly it would be located. Of all these theories, the most accepted is that the civilization that Plato was referring to was known as Minoan, whose people lived on the island of Crete in the Greek Bronze Age, from 3000 BC to 1100 BC. Therefore, this civilization would have been responsible for originating the Greek culture. According to studies, a major natural catastrophe did happen, but in the Aegean Sea around 1650 BC and 1450 BC. This catastrophe became known as the Minoan eruption, and is also known as one of the largest volcanic events on Earth ever recorded in history. At that time, the Minoan people who lived in the region, that is known today as the islands of Santorini and Crete, would have been hit by a tsunami that supposedly pushed the city under the sea or at least destroyed most of it. Still, all these incidents are just theories and coincidences because it seems unlikely that any of them will ever be proven. Do you believe that the truth about these mysteries will surface someday? Or will everything remain a complete enigma in history? Leave your comments below and subscribe for future videos. See you next time.